right. Well, once again, everybody, to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with my good buddy, Jamie Uyeyama. We're back after an off week where there really wasn't much to discuss, so we didn't bother having a Power Hour. We'd already kind of previewed spring practice and also the junior day. So we're back, and I'm back from a trip to South Bend. We went and watched the Irish practice, their very first practice. I'll give you my thoughts on that here shortly. Before we get going, it's a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. Lots going on. We had a huge junior day, a lot of good news from that. So if you really, really want to check out a lot of good information and some good news, go check out Irish Sports Daily. You can sign up, click on the premium section, and sign up today. Also, wanted to mention, if you're not a subscriber to our YouTube channel, make sure you go there and subscribe. You can watch Power Hour live, or you can watch the video after the fact. And, a lot of people seem to enjoy doing the YouTube thing. So check it out, subscribe, and we'd greatly appreciate it. Also wanted to mention our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing, founded by ND alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches, from All-Americans to All-Pros and Associates to CEOs. You're in great hands with ESQ Custom Clothing. Whether you're looking for the perfect fitting suit, a standout sport coat, or a perfect tuxedo for weddings, galas, ESQ Master Tailors blend traditional hand stitching in each garment with Italy and England's best fabrics. Check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com and book an appointment and update your wardrobe today. Mention ISD, get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that is esqclothing.com. All right, Yama. Well, I just want to say, first of all, it was fantastic getting back into the Bend. Took Angel and Will, and they hadn't been back since we moved, and so it was fun.
Really? This is the first time? Yeah.
First time they've been back, and so Angel. The worst part is her job that she had. The weekends in the fall is extremely busy, so there's just no way she could have gotten that. We could have got back for a game, but that's changed, and so hopefully we'll be back. I think we're going to be there for Michigan State is what the plan is. So it was fun. It was great to see everybody. Got to see some great friends, and it was great to be back on campus. And the new section of the Goog is coming along nicely. That should be done here soon. And I like it's looking good, and we'll see. And then, of course, practice was it was eye-opening, Yama. I mean, I'm telling you. And I mentioned this kind of in my report after my practice report after. I was sitting there with Tim Priester, Eric Hansen. The three of us are pretty much the old dogs around there. We've been around for a long, long time. And it was interesting listening to the conversation and how all of us said the same thing. Yeah, this is the most talented team with by far the most depth that we can remember, since the Holt days. And it's really kind of shocking when you see that, Jamie. I mean, I'm watching guys like Luke Tolich and Ethan Long, and I'm saying to myself, these guys would start at almost anywhere. I mean, they're that good and that talented, and yet they're second string. And then you look at a guy like, Greg and I were just talking before the show, and, a guy like Christian Gray, he's going to be in a big battle for his starting job. Here's a guy who started, this will be a third year starter, and he's going to be in a battle. Sanders is a really good corner. Dallas Golden is a really good corner. And then, they have just tons of guys that are out there that are going to make it very, very interesting. You watch the freshmen, and, Chaz Smith made a great play on pass coverage. Nick Reddish pick 6, it was just crazy to think that all these guys, and then you watch a guy like Aiden Pouncey, and you're saying to yourself, that's, Tay Johnson 2.0. He looks exactly like Tay did when he came in. Extremely athletic kid. Joey O'Brien. I mean, this is insane, the kind of level of talent and depth that they have. And then you go to, obviously linebacker, it's hard to say. I mean, when there's no pads, it's really hard to say what you have there. But the guys can run. There's no question about that. You go to the defensive line, Jamie. Man, I mean, they're just loaded with talent, and it's really exciting. Bubakar, wow! I mean, he just looked amazing. And then you throw Bryce Young, who looked much quicker and much more explosive, and gave Gerby Lambert all he wanted, all he could handle the entire day. And you say to yourself, Miami was great because of two things, right? Two great pass rushers, and those guys disrupted everything. And Notre Dame's going to have that this year. There's no doubt in my mind they're going to be able to get after the passer. And then you throw in a guy like Rodney Dunham, and yeah, I realize he's going against Owen Strebig, and first of all, I want to say Strebig looked good, much better than he had. Much more athletic. I couldn't believe how he reshaped his body. He's trim. He moved the ball, or moved very, very well. But you're looking at Dunham and you're saying, wow, this is incredible. This guy looks better than Bubakar did as a freshman at the same time. And by the way, he's 240. Bubakar was 210. So you're saying to yourself, man, the talent that this group has on defense is just insane. And then you watch the offense and you get excited too, because I don't know who should start at wide receiver. There's so many guys there that really look like they can contribute and they can play. And I'm just really excited about it. It was great to see Aeneas Williams. There's really no reason, it looks like, to have the red jersey on him when you watch him out there. I mean, he does everything that everybody else does other than get hit, and looks really, really good doing it. Nolan James, I realize they're not Price and Love, but Nolan James, great jump cut, great feet in the hole, has power, runs low to the ground. It's just going to be a really interesting thing to see what happens there when it comes to running back. And then you look at the quarterback situation. First of all, CJ was sharp as could be. Yeah, he took a chance. That's going to happen. I mean, that's what spring practice is for. Let's see what we can get away with. Let's see what we can't. He had the interception, but the rest of the time, very, very on point. And then again, I was shocked at how good Noah Grubbs looked. I'm Jamie, I've been critical of him. His accuracy. That's what I kept saying. I'm just not sure he's very accurate. Now, can he move in the pocket well enough? We'll see. We'll see what happens. But his accuracy was very surprising for a freshman, and very surprising considering what I've seen of him in the past. And I'll say this, Blake Ebert, he looked much better throwing the football. Still needs to work on the accuracy. But then you saw him run. They ran an option with him. And I was like, wow. I mean, he is quick. He is very, very quick. So I feel better about the quarterback position. If something were to happen, they're probably not going to win the national championship with any of these guys, but it isn't as big of a gap as I thought it would be going into this. So there was a lot of encouraging stuff, and I'm excited. And I think Ty Washington said it best. I feel sorry for the competition. I really do. This is going to be a very difficult team to beat if they play well and they play. And that's the other thing that stood out to me is there just weren't a lot of mistakes. You didn't see fumbles, you didn't see false starts, you didn't see all the stuff that you expect to see as a first practice. You didn't see any of it, and the pace of the practice. Everything just boom, 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 boom. It was just flawless. It was such an impressive practice, and it's the first one. So I don't want to get everybody too excited, but I was excited. And, a lot of people say, oh, Mike's negative. He's always negative. Well, here I am positive, okay? And that's exciting. So thoughts on all of this and things that you saw, heard, from the first practice?
Yeah, no, well, I could say too, Mike, that I think first of all, people overblow how negative you are. I don't think it's the case all the time, that the way that people paint it. But I will say that when you called me after practice, it's probably the most excited I've heard you about just the talent. It's nothing you didn't say there. It's everything you said there. It's just how the roster is built. It's the most impressive roster that they've had. And I think there's just not a lot of, and yes, like you said, there's they backup quarterback and all that, and there's still obviously a lot to happen there, and to figure out Teddy Gerard's going to get on campus and all that. But I think if you just talk about like when you were just that first part you were talking about with Ethan Long and Luke Talich, those guys would start not just on so many other teams that like Notre Dame's opponents, they would have started on like probably most of the last 20 years at Notre Dame at safety, right? Like that
Yeah. Oh, there's
that's
no doubt.
yeah, and um that's the thing is that there's real talent in the depth and like the youth there, and obviously the athletes. It's incredible like how they've upgraded the athletes, and I'm sure there's like NFL scouts that can speak to, you know, the difference in the level of like NFL level guys that Notre Dame has had. And I think you are going to start to see in the next um, few years where it's not going to be more common for them to have double digit guys in the NFL just because that's how they're built now. But it's just, you know, kind of blows me away that it's just, it's been building. And last year, I know last year I thought it was the exact same thing when I, you know, saw the defense and I was just like, I realized the defense was great the last year, but just athlete wise, up and down the roster, it was as impressive as it gets. And it just obviously it's gotten better. I think they've upgraded, right? So I think that obviously is, you know, stood out to me. I think the one thing that you know, I won't go into like I don't want to like overload every single thing that I was thinking, but I think right away too, the which we kind of talked about before, the offensive line configuration, right? And they put Will Black at left tackle. They moved Knapp to left guard. Otting was at center. Sullivan Absher right guard, and Lambert they moved out back out to right tackle. And I think one thing, and Mike Denbrock said it after the practice too, is that people shouldn't get ahead of everything and think, hey, this is how it's going to be.
Yes.
Like you said, they know that Anthony Knapp can play left tackle and be good at left tackle. They're seeing what they have right now in Black and whether or not he can do what he can be. And obviously the first day he's going to go against Boubacar, and like you said, how impressive Boubacar is. I mean, Boubacar's a senior. He's a potential All-American this year.
Yeah.
Will Black should not dominate him. Like that's not going to happen. But what you want to see is like over the course of the spring, those guys are going neck like it's head to head, like, and
Yes.
you just see Black get better. And I think that's the thing that this is probably what every Notre Dame fan would want out of this, especially not knowing what the status is with Charles Jugusaw and where when he might be back or if he'll ever be back. But the two most talented guys, just from a pure like traits perspective, are Will Black and Kirby Lambert. And those guys, if they reach their full potential, those guys are first round picks
Oh yeah.
at left tackle and will play at tackle in the NFL for many years if they
I
reach their
agree.
potential. And that's exactly why you want those guys there, and you hope that you get the best out of those guys, because Will Black is, or not Will Black, but Anthony Knapp could probably start at all five positions in the offensive line and be
I agree.
good. And
Be
maybe
great.
he might, yeah, and maybe
Mhm.
even be an All American at guard. Like I think that might be the case. But obviously, there has to be he Black has to be the level that Knapp is. But the reason he's there at left tackle is because of his ceiling and what he
Yeah.
can become. And frankly, I'm really excited to see that because I'm I want Will Black to win the left tackle job because I
Me
think
too.
that could make Notre Dame the best version of what the offensive line of what they have. Because like we said, Knapp could go anywhere and be very good to great. So I just think that is the kind of the ideal thing. I love that they're doing that to start spring. You know, it doesn't always work out that way. Like obviously they were going to move Hainsey to left tackle, didn't stick there, right?
Yeah.
And then Eichenberg became left tackle and all that. So it doesn't always work out that way, but I think in a perfect world, that's the way it'll work out. And I'm really excited about that if it happens.
I am too, and I think people need to pump the brakes a little bit on Will Black starting, right? Because if you watch the first practice, he wasn't as good as Anthony Knapp, but it's the first practice. You got 14 more that they're going to have, and then you got all of fall camp, everything he can work on through the summer. He's going to get better. So you're absolutely right. The best thing that can happen is Will Black becomes the left tackle. That's what you're hoping for. That's what Notre Dame's hoping for with them trying it. We know Anthony Knapp's a very good player. And, you mentioned Hainsey. I wonder in the end if he ends up doing what Hainsey did in the NFL and playing center. Can he snap the ball? I don't know. The one thing I will say about his NFL future, I do think he can be a very good guard. It's just, can he get to 310 pounds? I think for an NFL guard, you'd like him to be 315 if you could, and really 330 if you'd really had your wishes. So, but he is such a good run blocker that I don't think that that's going to be an issue for him in the NFL. He's just very, very sound, very physical player. And I would love to see him play guard for Notre Dame. I would love to see that happen, and hopefully that's what we see. Lambert, again, he had some growing pains too. But you're going against a pretty good pass rusher in Bryce Young, and a guy who's elevating, and so you expect him to struggle a little bit because he has been playing guard, and so it's a different thing. It's a different speed out there, everything. So I expect Gerby Lambert to get better. Otting didn't have the best day, especially in pass rush. But he has played better. I have seen him play better in games. And so, probably just a little, shake off the cobwebs. Let's get back into it. But he's also going against some pretty good players in there. The interesting thing too, Jamie, as I mentioned to you, was Armel Mukum above Jason Onye out there. That was a little bit of surprise to me. Did that surprise you?
Definitely surprised. Like I wouldn't have expected that at all. But I was saying to Greg when we did Hidden Hustle on Friday after the practice, when the practice reports were coming out, that having him and Elijah Hughes with the ones, it doesn't necessarily mean like, hey, those guys are going to be starters like what's going forward, because it's the day one of spring ball, just like we said with Anthony Knapp and Will Black and
Sure.
what their situation is. But if what it does say is that those guys had great winter workouts. Those guys really, really did well there. And I think that is about as positive sign as you can get. Like, it's not surprising with like Elijah Hughes at all, just based on like how things went for him last year. But I think with Armel Mukum, he was a guy who was in the portal. He wasn't in the rotation last year. He was in the portal. He has always had traits where you thought, man, this guy, there's something there. And there's been flashes, but the consistency hasn't been there. He hasn't put it all together. Obviously, he didn't play a ton of football before. He never played inside before he came to Notre Dame. So it's going to be a big adjustment. And you knew that he still had potential. So that must mean he's getting close. Like that it's happening. That I would say it's a really, really good sign that he has a good chance to be part of the rotation this year. And when you consider who they have there already, right? They have Onye, Brew, Tion Gray, as well as those two guys. Chris Burgess
Burgess.
That's Hughes. But Chris Burgess is like, he's definitely a defensive tackle. Like,
there's no doubt. Yes.
Yeah. He's a big boy and people are excited about him. And I mean, there's more guys than that who are going to be competing for it too. I mean, it's the deepest that I can remember that they're really going to have a tough time, I think, narrowing down who's in the rotation. And they've had injuries there. So, that someone will have to step up anyways. You're going to probably need at least 5 guys based on what they've had the last couple of years. But I mean, I think they have it there. And that is a really, really good sign for Mukum to be there. And I want to see, I wouldn't be down if he's like not with the ones at the end of spring, but just the fact that he did shows that like he came back, and when he decided to come back to Notre Dame, he took it very seriously, and they like what they've seen.
Here's what I like, Jamie, when I look at this. First of all, the new roster came out, and I see Tiki Hola at 310. I like that. I like seeing that. That's good. And then you look at, Davian Dixon at 316. He's down in weight. I think that that's important. Sevillano, they have at 320. And then you just start looking at all these guys and you say, man, they all, you have Tion Gray, at 330. And, Hughes is at 295 now, and Brewu is at 285. And so in the past, Jamie, Notre Dame's been good and they've had some quick guys, but they haven't been big. Notre Dame's starting to get big. You throw Burgess in there at 300, Onyé over 300. They're bigger inside now too, which I think is going to help with the run game. And it's just a matter. I really think that that's kind of the thing. How great can Notre Dame be? I think is going to really depend on how well that offensive line gels, and they got plenty of time to do that because they're not facing murderers row out of the first two games. They have time to get better and gel. And then two, how quickly can that interior defensive line kind of get together? And also I think it's important for Notre Dame to make sure they have some extra pass rushers, some guys who can help out, that can help. But, when I look at Dunham and I look at Boubacar and I look at Bryce Young, those are three really good pass rushers already. And then we know KVA is going to rush the passer quite a bit. We know Snead, they'll put him in there as well in pass rush situations. So I think they're going to be fine in that regard. I just think that the only questions I have right now is how quickly can Partridge work with the guys who don't have a lot of experience and get them ready to go and ready to play. And then again, the offensive line. Another thing I wanted to point out, which was, I thought, interesting, was how many periods of team they had. And I think that was surprising. But I think football school helps that in that you kind of prepare and you know what it's going to be. But I don't think they would be doing that if they didn't feel like they had the depth to overcome injuries. Just having that much team, I think, really gives you an advantage in that you're now going full speed, and these guys are seeing what it looks like live. And again, you're not taking guys to the ground. It's not quite as physical, but you get into that mentality, and now you're out there and it's full go. It's not all individual. That we didn't see hardly any individual in that practice. Before we would see probably 6 periods of individual before we even saw anything, like one-on-ones or anything like that. That was not the case. And so they must feel pretty good about where they are in the fundamentals of things. And, you're not doing as much fundamental work, which is usually what you do in the spring. I thought that was kind of surprising. Again, one practice, I'm sure they'll do more fundamental work, but I thought it was interesting that that's what we saw. Thoughts here?
I mean, it is. And I obviously Marcus Freeman talked about how they were going to be able to do more of that. So that's great, that happened, because individual is really important. It might not be especially if media is there, it can be boring for a lot of it, some of it, because it's, a lot of it is like technique work. And that's not the kind of stuff that people want to read in a practice report, right? They want to read about like this guy made an interception or this guy got a sack or whatever. So I get it, but that stuff is important. But if they've already built that base, doing more team and doing more 7-on-7 and doing all of those kind of specific things, that gives you a way better opportunity to evaluate your roster and evaluate and have guys compete. And the more team you do, the more chances that you get to see Tay Johnson just make incredible plays or whatever. But not even just Tay Johnson. You get to see a guy like Nick Reddish, who you mentioned before had the pick 6. his first ever college football practice, the guy gets a pick six, right? Like, first of all, how awesome is that call home when he's telling
Well,
his
no doubt.
parents or whatever, right?
No
But
doubt. Yeah. And he
yeah,
looked fast. He
yeah.
looked fast out there. I was surprised. Anyway, go ahead.
But that's how guys like him, and it's one practice. The first practice could have been just like, hey, he had this great moment in his first practice, but you start stacking up plays. That's how all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, now Reddish is with the twos, and now he's with this, and like, maybe we got to give a look at him. Like, that's what it happens, and that's like basically with a guy like Ethan Long and all that too, where the way that Ethan Long forces his way into, hey, you got to play me too. I have to be one of the guys playing. Maybe I'm not starting because of you got Schuler and Johnson or whatever, but I got to play as well. Is he makes plays in team when they go 11 on 11 or 7 on 7 and stuff. So that's the best way to do it. And that, and also too, that's how someone like Will Black, that's how he gets better. With those reps are how you really, really can get better and learn, because there's nothing like going against a guy like Boubacar. For him, that experience is like, there's going to be very few guys that he goes against all year who are going to be at that level, but it's just iron sharpens iron, right? You have to go against that to be able to be prepared for
it. Two things. On the Tay Johnson thing, it doesn't show it on the video, but first of all, Tay Johnson, there's no doubt in my mind that guy's going to be a first round pick. There's just no doubt. And if you watch this play, Jamie, you would say, I mean, it was amazing to watch because he was shaded on the opposite hash. That's where he was, the opposite hash. And, Carr threw a bullet. It wasn't like a rainbow. It was a bullet. And he recognized it immediately all the way from the other side of the opposite hash and just comes screaming across the field and then just Supermans to go out and grab this ball and then somehow keeps his feet in bounds. It was just miraculous. And I've watched a lot of safeties at Notre Dame. Nobody's ever done that. David Bruton was probably the best athlete I ever saw out there at safety, besides probably Kyle Hamilton. But Bruton, I felt, was faster. But I'm telling you, this guy is he is so fast. It is unbelievable. And Notre Dame has not had a guy who can just, and if you can play single high like that, and that guy can do what he does, man, that's a huge advantage for Notre Dame. And that guy's got that kind of ability. And then you see Aiden Pouncey and you say, oh, that guy's got that kind of athleticism too. That's very, very special. And for a defensive coordinator, that just changes what you can do. And it's just, it wasn't just the fact that he's that great of an athlete to get over there. It's the fact that he recognized it so quickly what was going to happen. And instincts are what makes great players. And that's what X Watts is. X Watts. He's not a great athlete. I mean, he's a good athlete, but he's not a great athlete. It's his instincts that makes him what it is. And you mentioned Ethan Long, and that's exactly the same thing. And when we were talking about him as a player that was being recruited and as a commitment, that was the one thing I kept saying. This guy's not necessarily a great athlete. It doesn't jump out on film that he's an amazing athlete, but here's a play with a pick. Here's a play where he forces a fumble. Here's a play where he hit a big, huge hit that forces a fumble. He just made constant plays over and over and over on his high school film. And you said, don't discount this guy. If you continue to make plays like that, that's how you get on the field. And it's just, it's really impressive to see how much talent they have back there. The last thing I wanted to mention, or not the last thing, but another thing I wanted to point out about the Mookum thing. Do you think maybe this is a message to not only Mookum, but to everybody else that's out there? Hey,
oh yeah,
I'm Charlie Partridge. I don't know you, right? I don't know who you are. And I like this Mookum kid on film. And I'm trying to tell Mookum, I believe in you, man. I think you have potential to be really great. I really do. I wouldn't put you in the first slot if I didn't believe in you. But it's also a message to Onye. It's a message to everybody else that's out there. Hey, just because you've played, that don't mean nothing to me, right? That means nothing to me. This is a competition And I wonder if that is the thing that this means. Is it is a message? Your thoughts?
Oh, 100%. And it's funny because I told the story, Mike, on Hidden Hustle on Friday, how with my freshman year, so like, I redshirted, and then um I come in for the first spring ball. We didn't have early enrollees or anything, so my first spring ball. So um I was I was listed on the first team nose guard, but I was 240 pounds. But they put me first team nose guard, and everyone was like, "What?" Like, I was like, What am I doing?" First of all, thanks. I didn't know I was moving to defensive tackle. Then, secondly,
Yeah,
I see my team, the first team, and part of it was like, my coach was like, "You had a great winter. You worked your butt off. You earned it by being here at the beginning of thing, and we're moving you inside." Yeah, we don't. He basically told me to. I'm not expecting you to start this year.
yeah,
But I'm rewarding you right now for how hard you're working and all that too. And I also knew that there was a guy who was a returning starter there who was lazy. He was not a guy who was not a lead by example guy, and they were giving him a kick in the pants, and they were saying like, "Dude, yeah, go with the second team." You had a brutal. You were always, oh, Miami this, Miami whatever. He was always doing whatever, and then all of a sudden, the first few days of spring practice, he's kicking butt, and then they put him back up for the first team, right? Like it's 100% that, and you don't want to hand anything to any of the transfers coming in, no matter how like good Francis Brew is doing in the weight room or whatever you think of Tion Gray. It's like, no, those guys got to earn it. And I think that says a lot too about like a guy like Elijah Hughes, who people kind of weren't throwing. Like, they would have thought that Mookum would have been ahead of him last year. It's like, well, no, he came in and he earned it. Like,
yeah.
and even a guy like JJB was a Javante John Baptiste, a perfect example. He wasn't lighting the world on fire. And then he all of a sudden developed and he got better. And all of a sudden, man, he was a huge impact player. But RJ Oben never really earned it and didn't become that starter. You got to earn it. And I think all of it is motivation for those guys. I love that too, because it's one of these things where Charlie Partridge, he's new. You got to earn your spot with him. Whatever you were, even though Nick Sebastian's there and he's obviously has a relationship with these guys too, you still got to earn the respect and everything from Coach Partridge and show exactly like what why you deserve to play.
Yama, they talk about competition in the room elevates the room, right? And I think that that's very true. And as Greg and I were talking, Christian Gray is going to be in a battle. There's no doubt about it when you look at all the talent that they have there. But there's also something that I think people need to consider as well, and that is you're going against really good players too. So Notre Dame needs their wide receivers to develop. They need Micah Gilbert to step up. They need Cam Williams to step up. And by the way, that was fantastic to see both really have great practices, and they looked great. They really did. And then you talk about Jerome Bettis Jr., right? And Elijah Perez, he made an amazing catch. And Jerome Bettis Jr., way better. I mean, much better. But guess what? These guys are getting better because they're going against Leonard Moore, right? They're going against Christian Gray. They're going against Sanders. They're going against Dallas Golden. They're going against Tay Johnson and Adon Schuler. I mean, that is, you just can't, you can't simulate. It's kind of like they talk about Navy, right? You can't simulate the speed of Navy, but when you're going against guys who are probably NFL players, most of them, and a lot of them could be very high NFL picks as a receiver, and you got to go compete against Leonard Moore every day, you're just going to get better. You're going to, because you got to show that you can beat Leonard Moore if you're going to get on the field. So I'm just really encouraged by seeing so much talent and how I think that's going to elevate everybody, because you're competing against these guys. It's not just the guys in your room, but the opposite side has really quality football players, and that's going to help, when you talk about Black, Will Black's not going to go against anybody as good as Bubakar. I don't think. I haven't seen anybody that they face. When you look at their competition this year, that I think is going to be as good as Bubakar. And so, if you go against that guy every day in practice, that's going to help you when you go against anybody else that's out there. So, that's what's so impressive about this, and why I think teams like Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama in the Saban years. They could keep reloading because these guys were ready to go because they're facing some of the best players in the country every single day. And to me, that's very, very encouraging. Thoughts here?
Yeah, and I think if you can even go back to just a couple years ago, Mike, where I remember in fall camp, the receivers, no one was catching anything against the DBs. Like they were getting dominated. And, obviously and Cam Hart out there, and there was just not a lot of room there. Just the level at the receiver, the speed at receiver wasn't close to where it is now. And now that it's changed, and Mike Denmark mentioned too, like they're faster at the skill positions than they were before. And that's just something too where it forces all these guys to kind of elevate if you want to play, because you have to do that, but it also forces those DBs. It's like, man, if you want to be like next in line, or if you want to be Christian Gray to keep your job, you have to be at a certain level every day. Because if you have a bad day, it's going to look bad against the guys you're going against, right? So,
yes,
I think, honestly, probably if you look at, say, with like Christian Gray, he's made a lot of plays. He's been a good player for Notre Dame. I don't want to take anything away from what he's done, but I think there's obviously been moments where you would have said maybe if they had more competition, they would have yanked him in certain situations because he was getting cooked or whatever in certain situations. Now it's like the margin for error is like you can't have that margin for error anymore. And that's just that's changed, and that I think is ultimately, and hopefully to the depth, it helps him be a little bit more healthy. I know he was banged up a bit last year, but hopefully it helps him level up, because he's clearly a very good football player, and he's someone that everyone kind of assumes like, man, he's gonna be tough to keep the job. He might level up and be like an elite player this year. Like that is on the table as well.
Yeah, it certainly is. It certainly is. I think so much of it's confidence. I think just a little bit of confidence. We got to get him back to that, and he started to find that again at the end of the year. So that was exciting to see. And again, you talk about wide receiver, and it looked so weird out there. Seeing Jordan Faison and Mylan Graham running, next to each other, and then of course. Micah Gilbert was out there, but that doesn't even factor in Jaden Greathouse, right? It doesn't factor in Quincy Porter when he gets healthy. And we mentioned Elijah Barres has been rising for quite a while, and a guy that a lot of people thought would be contributing a lot, and he probably will. But then you don't know, because you get somebody like Cam Williams suddenly start to emerge, and you're sitting there saying, wow, I mean, they have, I think, at least 6 guys that I feel real comfortable. I haven't seen Porter run yet, so until we see that and he's 100% healthy, we don't know. But they'll have 6 guys easily that I really believe you can count on, and probably more than that. So, and then speed. I mean, there is a lot of speed. A lot of people think Jordan Faison's fast. Mylan Graham is fast. Mylan Graham is much faster than Faison, and Faison is very fast. There's no question about it. But Mylan Graham just has that little extra something, that extra gear that the very elite players have. And so you're just standing there saying, man, this is a very impressive group of receivers as far as physically and the ability to make plays. And again, these guys were making plays against Notre Dame secondary. They were. And that's a good secondary. There's a lot of good players that they're facing, and they're out there making these plays. So it was impressive to see. I can't wait to see what happens. I won't be there for the next practice. The Yama's flying in for that one. And so we'll see how much advance they've made. But I'm just very encouraged and excited by what I saw. Um, Another thing I love seeing, Jamie, and I know this is dumb, I love the fights in practice. Because it just, you don't want everybody fighting all the time, and you don't want it to get real crazy or real physical, but you could just tell there was an energy. I've been to a lot of practices, and you know, a lot of times, I don't want to say people are just kind of walking around, but there was an energy. These guys wanted to do something. They wanted to show what they could do. And when they were challenged, they didn't like it and they wanted to fight. And I love seeing that. Marcus Freeman wasn't in a rush to get over there and break it up. Nobody, a lot of the coaches usually let the players deal with it, and they usually do. But he wasn't yelling about it in any way. Obviously there was I think the Faison one went on a little bit long, and he said, finally went over there and said, hey, let's, break this up or whatever. But I love seeing that. And I love seeing Jordan Faison being one of those guys, right? That's a guy who's committed and wants to be great. And to me, I love seeing that. You don't want that to happen, all the time in practice, but I love to see the competitive spirit and to see it happen. You've been to a lot of practices. I've been to a lot of practices. It doesn't happen that often. And there were at least 3, probably 4 that and they weren't, dragging on the ground, let's start punching type of thing. It was more grabbing face mask and pushing and shoving and that type of thing. But that's what you want to see. I was very encouraged by that as well. Thoughts there?
Yeah, as long as it doesn't linger on too long, like you said, and it gets
Yeah,
like crosses the
personal.
line, then you're fine. But I also think any coach who says like, yeah, I hate fighting in practice is a liar. Like
They may say it, yes, but they are lying.
they're 100% lying. They're
Yes.
100% lying because they know that it's guys competing, and that is what's bringing it out. And they want them to have that fire. And like they always say, it's easier to rein somebody in than to get somebody to like push them to get to that competitive level where they're getting to the and have that edge. And you got to have guys with that edge. It's a violent game. It is a violent game. And it doesn't have to be it's not just defense. It's you got to have it on offense too. And not just the offensive line. It has to go all around. And like you said, like a guy like Faison, like great teams, you got someone with edge or multiple someone's with edge at each position. Like guys that really are like they're competing their butt off. And I always thought one of the things too is that like that makes Marcus Freeman that he doesn't get enough credit for is that he promotes that. Like he wants that. He likes guys like people don't think of JD Bertrand as because he was such like a respectful guy. He's like honor society and all that kind of stuff. He's like one of the mouthiest guys out there.
Yeah.
He like talks him and you think of Maris Leofau like that, but you don't think of JD Bertrand, but really like they're the same. They're both like that. And that is something that I think that when you have that, it's like, and it's authentic because there's a lot of fake tough guys out there, but when it's authentic and you have that, that's a great thing. And you just want to have it. Tay Johnson has that. He certainly has that. Jalen Sneed has that. And you want to maybe pull it back sometimes or whatever, right? Yeah. But hey, you'd rather pull it back, than have to push guys to do it. And they just got a lot of guys like that want it. And I think it's great, man. That's why it's part of the reason I love football.
You can just tell there's the confidence. This team is confident, and I love the Ty Washington quote. I just thought that was awesome. And I want them to be cocky like that. I want them to feel like you can't beat us. You absolutely cannot. And I really feel like this team, just watching it, that's how they feel. And I think Marcus has done a great job of the mental part of this, right? And getting their mindset and saying, look, we're not leaving any doubt. 20-point win, that's not enough, right? Let's win by 50. And I think they can do that to a lot of teams. I really do. And so I love the attitude. I love the aggression. And the joy. There was just so much joy out there. You know, when they make a play, people were going crazy, and it's like this is the first practice, and people are going nuts. And so, I just was very, very encouraged by what I saw, and I just can't wait to see what it is. Now, I'm not going to ask you this now because I want you to watch a practice, but we'll have to sit down and talk after you watch your practice. You know, where you might think there might be some questions that aren't answered at this point, and obviously there's plenty of time to answer those questions, and still some players that'll be added that could potentially factor in. You just never know there could be a freshman that just really surprises, and you're just like, wow. I mean, you watch Joey O'Brien out there, and it's like, I don't know how he would get on the field because the guy's in front of him, but man, what an athlete. And so you just never know. Nobody thought Kyle Hamilton would play as a freshman, coming in. Nobody thought he'd do what he did right away. And so it is possible that this happened. Nobody thought Leonard Moore would do what he did. And so there's a lot of things that could happen. And, we'll just have to see. I want to switch now to recruiting. Big weekend this weekend. Lots of talent in. First of all, it was a beautiful day out there. I was there on campus with my son and my wife. My son loves photography, so he wanted to go take a bunch of pictures, and that's what we did on Saturday, and just kind of walk around campus, the bookstore, the whole nine. And it was on campus because you had ND softball, you had lacrosse, you had ND baseball, and then the students had some crazy thing going on as well, like a St. Patrick's Day party. And it even, I don't know if you saw the video, but it even ended up on Barstool and it was nuts, So I just think there was a lot of juice on practice or on campus for this recruiting weekend. And it sounds like it opened some eyes to some people as far as, everybody seemed to have a really good time. The weather was nice. Everything, it just really worked out as it would be. I'm going to ask you though, just to give me some thoughts on some of the guys that were there that you really like on film. I mean, who are some of the guys that really kind of stand out to you that you really hope Notre Dame has a great shot at?
Well, I mean, I would start up front with on offensive line, like Albert Simeon.
Yes.
That's a guy that, I mean, obviously he is an elite prospect, big time prospect. I think that
Yes.
would be someone who would be an incredible pickup for them. At tackle there. I think he's been someone that obviously there's going to be it's going to be hard to pull him out from the South. It always is with those guys. But that is one of those ones that you just kind of watch for, Mike, where it just feels like Notre Dame, when they can hang around and actually be in it, and if they keep hanging around then they can pull it out, right? So that is somebody to watch, and he seems like he's a fit, and that is always an important
I
thing.
think personality fit is very important. Yes. And he's going to fit in that room for sure.
Yeah, especially on the offensive line. I mean, I love the D line, the men that they brought in. I think that Forstall, Green, and O'Neal. I mean, those three guys, big time, like all big time. I think that Forstall, obviously, I mean, Forstall and KJ Green are already like composite 5-star guys. So it's not like I have to gush about them too much, but I really do think that like Forstall is just one of those guys who's just exceptionally long, great twitch, just really high motor. KJ Green is like super skinny, but you can just see the athleticism there. And it's like similar to a Rodney Dunham. Like, I would say maybe he's not quite there, and he needs to, not as big, but like has to develop a little more. But you can see, man, the piece there. And I love Aiden O'Neal. I think he's super underrated. He is an explosive athlete. Another guy who's long. I think he's going to be a 3-tech. I think that's where he's going to end up. Really high motor kid, active hands. I would say he's like kind of like a more athletic Riley Mills. is how I
Mhm.
would kind of put him. And obviously, Riley Mills is not a bad athlete at all.
Yeah.
Um, I really, really like Braden Parks. And Braden Parks was someone who
Love
went
him.
to Irish Invasion last year, and I got a chance to watch in person. Man, he's got, I think, big time pass rush skills and
Oh, totally.
power, and
Power.
he's just absolute.
Physical.
And I would say too, he's not as long as you would like in certain things compared to some other guys, but he's so explosive, and his first step is so big time, and he's just like he's got good hands for this stage of his development, and I think he's a dude, and I think he's someone that is very important. Obviously, they're up against Oregon, Ohio State to land him, so I think he's a really, really important player.
Yes.
I mean, this was a unbelievable junior day in terms of junior days go, and obviously they waited to make sure, and they're trying to get all these guys. So like, obviously, like Jackson Dollar I think is an incredible. He would
Wow.
be, to me, he's a different level than the other guys that they're going after at tight end. Certainly, I don't want to like say like Cooper Terwilliger is more of like a true like Y inline tight end, kind of more in
Yeah.
the Cooper Flanagan type.
Yeah.
And I think he's a good prospect, but in terms of really like dynamic, like Dollar is more of that, right? Like he is more in the Bremer, Preston Friesel type thing. And I mean, I really like Zane Gamble. Mike, I think
Yeah.
he's a really, really like just, I mean, it obviously goes to a really good school, great ball skills, just playmaker, not, and one of these guys who isn't as long and as some, like you see what Notre Dame has a safety now, and they have like
Yeah.
these guys, they have the giants out there, and he's not quite that, but his instincts are just top notch. And he's just
Yeah.
one of these guys that if you watch him, it's like, every little thing you see him make plays deep. You see him make plays near the line of scrimmage. You see him come from depth and run the alley and make tackle guys in space. And he's just a really, really good football player. I'm a big fan of his. And I really, really like, you know, uh, Joking Gouda as well.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
he hits like a truck. I think he's a good player. Noah Glover, I think, is a pretty good player too. So those two guys, I mean, wouldn't say that they're. I would put them lower than I would think of those D linemen. This might be the best D line group that I can
Yeah.
remember just at a junior day that they've
In one
had.
day. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I think that right there is like, and some of the other guys that they're in on too, Mike. And you texted me like last week or a couple weeks ago and asked me what I thought about the D line group. I think they're just recruiting a different level of D linemen now, and it's just, you can really, really like see the difference. And um, I think, as good as last year's defensive line class was for Notre Dame, if they do, if they hit on enough of these guys, this one's going to be better.
Yeah, I think it honestly, I really do. And I love the last class. But man, if you could hit on 4 or 5 of these guys that they have, and again, I think Braden Park, they got to get that guy. And I just love him. I just love the way he plays football. It's just exactly the way Chris played football is really what it is. And everybody wants another Chris Zorich, that's for sure. Monger, if you're out there, which guys of these guys do you like at this point? I don't know if you heard me. Greg? Yeah, he may not be paying he must not be paying attention. That's all right. Running backs, Jamie. Rogers, Trey Segura, and Lathan Wiston. I like all those guys. I really do. I think I like Wisdom the most. I like him the most. I think that guy's going to be a really, really good player. But I think the others are good too. If I had to pick it, I'd say Wissington and then Segura and then Rogers. That's the way I would look at it, me personally. But your thoughts on the backs?
I personally like Segura a little bit more than Wissington. But I like both of those. Would be, to me, I would put those guys above Rogers. Um, I think Rogers is a good back, but I don't think he's like quite a home run hitter. Like I like
Yeah.
him, maybe not love him as a prospect. I think Segura has just like more juice and just like
Yeah, I
someone
do.
who has like a little bit of a different gear. I think Wizington has a lot of that gear too, and you see him, um, really like run through arm tackles and stuff. He's a bit high cut as a runner. That would be my only thing about him is like he runs a bit high at times, but I think those both those him and Segura are the kind of guys that I think you want to have in this kind of thing where if like you get a crease, they can go.
Greg, your thoughts on these guys? Anybody stand out to you that you really like?
On the recruit section.
Yeah, the recruits. Yeah, yeah.
Well, obviously, as a DB guy, right? Like the Zayden Gamble really fires me up. I think I like what Jamie said. Like I think he's one of those guys that like he doesn't have that like crazy size, but his instincts are really good. He plays with force and he plays with a lot of ferocity, which I really I just kind of enjoy, right? Someone who wants to stick their face in it. I mean, Matt's always making his comments about the tight ends in our group chat, which is unfortunate. Bring me Jackson Dollar and I'll put him on the field. So, right, that's a special athlete. Like, he's someone who it's just like you take him every time. I agree with the.
I think he's a better athlete than even Eifert. I really do. I loved Eifert. Yeah, I loved Eifert.
He's I think he's a better athlete than Freisel, and I love Freisel. I think Freisel's a really good athlete, but I think Jackson Dollar's just kind of like in that premier kind of, ilk. So he's really good player. I agree with the running back comments. I like Trey Segura a lot. And just to Jamie's point, like I think it goes to the whole team they're just in a different aisle section of the D line, which is it's kind of like suddenly the D line has taken the way of like the way the DBs went. When it was DBs and it was just very hard for Notre Dame to get those like top quality DBs in the class to come visit. And now suddenly like that's what's happening on the defensive line for Notre Dame. So like that's kind of an exciting thing, right? If Notre Dame can take that next step with the D line, the way that they did with the defensive backs, because they've certainly done it with the roster. The roster is obviously just different. I mean, how they move around is just a different feel than any other thing. It doesn't mean that they're going to be great as a football team. It doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that they're going to go undefeated. But the fact of the matter is just from a physical size, speed, power component, they're a different program than they have been in the past.
It's exciting. It really is. I went back and rewatched Cameron Wagner too. A lot of people think he's going to end up in the class. I like him. I think he's kind of an Augustine type of guy. I don't know if he's going to be a left tackle, but I do think he can play right tackle. A pretty good athlete, good size, physical. Probably not the greatest competition, but I liked him. I liked him more than I remembered. So that was kind of encouraging. I think that they're set up pretty good with recruiting. There are a few positions I think that I'd like to see some more of, though. If there's one position that I'd really like to see them get more guys on campus, it's wide receiver, and that's kind of it's been that way for a while. I remember last year at this time, everybody's kind of like, well, who are they going to get? It worked out pretty well. They got some pretty darn good players in the end. So I don't think there's any time to panic, but we're not seeing the elite of the elite, scheduled so far. And that doesn't mean that these guys can't be good players that they're bringing in, but I'd sure like to see some more. And it would be nice if, maybe a couple of these guys, the top guys they could get on campus. And again, it's tough when you don't put guys in the league. It's kind of like quarterback until you get a guy like CJ Carr and you show you can develop him. It's tough to get, the top wide receivers. And, even though Notre Dame's throwing the ball, they don't have another CJ Carr lined up behind him. Maybe that's Gerard, maybe that's Noah Grubbs, but they're not considered neither of those guys are considered, one of the top 3 quarterbacks in their class of that year. And so it's hard to be the Pied Piper if you're not that. But I really think the big thing for Notre Dame is just continue to have a guy like CJ Carr develop and become the type of player that you want. And we're sure of that. But more importantly, we need Faison. We need Mylan Graham. We need those guys to show that, man, they're big time players and they were developed at Notre Dame. And I think that that's going to help with that. I like where Notre Dame's depth is at wide receiver right now. When you look, they've got Porter, Gilbert, Jerome Bettis, Elijah Barres, Logan Saldate, Mylan Graham, Cam Williams, all those guys got 2 years after this. Greathouse got another year if he wants it. You got Fitzgerald, all the freshmen. So it's not like they need a lot of receivers in this class. You probably only need 3 tops. And it's important though that you get a couple of those guys like a Julius Jones or Junior. You need somebody like that can help with this, and it's very important they land that. So that's the only kind of position right now where I'm a little bit concerned. I would like to see a few more top linemen, but as long as you get the guys that you brought in, I mean, if you land an Albert Simeon and a Cameron Wagner, and then there's obviously Von Bryan as well, you land those guys, you're doing pretty good anyway, but you don't know that you're going to get them at this point. So I'd like to see a couple more top linemen scheduled and coming in this spring. Overall, guys, I'm excited. I can't wait to see this. And Yama, you're going to get to see a full practice later in April, and we're excited about that because later in April means that they've been through quite a few practices, and we'll see how they look with this. And it's a Saturday, which usually means in the spring that's probably going to be a scrimmage because it's a Saturday. So I'm excited about it. I can't wait. Anything you guys want to add before we close down the show?
I just think, typically that one too is like usually the Jersey scrimmage too. That it's like a pretty very highly competitive day. So I can't wait for that, and I'm excited, Mike. I always am, even though I know that I already get like an impression of a lot of these guys based on what you and Matt have seen too. I always like getting that kind of like first impression. And there's always somebody that isn't even mentioned or barely mentioned in the first practice that all of a sudden that guy, by the time you get later on in spring, you're like, who's this dude? This guy is just really standing out. And there's always one or two of those guys. And I'm excited for it.
I will say I'm going to take one for the team in the fall. We're going to send Monger instead of me because I feel like Greg just doesn't get in on the fun, and that's the funnest thing of this job. So I'm going to take one for the team. I'm going to surrender my viewing in fall for Greg, and can't wait to read what he has to say. And I got to do that. Greg's done such a great job for us, and so it's like pulling teeth for me. I hate giving that up, but I just got to. It's just he's earned it. So you'll be there. Greg will be there, and I'll be at home crying because I love that. It's really my favorite part of the job, and I'm sure Jamie, it's your favorite part of the job as well. Going to practice, and it's awesome. So especially when it's as fun as the last one was. So that was probably my favorite practice I've ever been to. Even though there wasn't even any pads, it was probably my favorite one I've ever been to. So, all right, folks, that's going to be it. I hope you enjoyed the show. We will be back next week, and we'll be talking more Irish football and recruiting. It'll be interesting to see how many of these recruits that haven't set up a visit set one up. And so we'll be watching that because there's some guys like Forstall that you really want to set that visit. And hopefully Notre Dame can manage that and get those things set up. But that's going to be it for the show, folks. Thanks for listening and watching, and we will talk to you next week on Power Hour.